Hello, I'm Parneet Jaggi, and this is going to be a brief overview and discussion on the novel Under the Net, written by Iris Murdoch. Now, to know a little bit about Iris Murdoch, she is a popular novelist even today. Dame Jean Iris Murdoch, born in 1919, was an Irish and a British novelist and a philosopher. Her important books include The Bell, A Severed Head, The Red and the Green, the Sea, which was also a Booker Prize in 1978, The Philosopher's Pupil, The Good Apprentice, and The Green Knight. So much so that in 2008, the Times magazine ranked Murdoch as 12th on a list of the 50 greatest British writers since 1945. Now, here the work under consideration is her first novel, Under the Net, which was also selected in 1998 as one of the Modern Library's 100 best English language novels of the 20th century. Published in 1954 and set in London, it is actually the story of a young, struggling writer named Jake Donahue. As this is Murdoch's first novel, it actually blends the philosophical and the picaresque qualities which have actually made her one of the most popular novelists of the century, and also this novel as a very, very popular novel. It is dedicated to Raymond Queneau. And we find that, as the title suggests, Under the Net, this net is actually a symbol. It is the net of abstraction, generalization, and theory. For example, we'll talk about it during the summary also, that there is a quotation from the hero Jake's book, which he has written by the name of The Silencer. It includes a passage which says, "All theorizing is flight. We must be ruled by the situation itself, and this is unutterably particular. Indeed, it is something to which we can never get close enough, however hard we may try, as it were, to crawl under the net." So, as we look into the picture of the book, the cover page, we see the net, and as if these figures are crawling under the net. Now, when we look at the novel, it actually follows a writer. The character which takes us along the story is an aspiring writer by the name of Jake Donahue, as he stumbles from place to place through Europe in search of his illusory ideas. Now, this novel falls into the genre of the picaresque, and in this a kind of a comedic form in which this clever lower class protagonist makes his way up in the world using his wit and wisdom. For advice, this person, Jake Donahue, the hero, the protagonist, looks to his old philosopher friend, Hugo Belfounder. And the novel kinds of puts a modernist spin on this old form which depicts Donahue as a freeloader, and who succeeds actually in his attempts due to the serendipity of encounters that the chaos of the modern world provides. So, for several reasons, we can call this novel a great work of the 20th century. So, when the novel begins, it begins as Donahue returns to London after a brief visit to France. His relative, Finn, informs him that they have been kicked out of their benefactor, Madge's house, to make room for their wealthy new boyfriend, Sammy Starfield. Now, while they are packing, they want to vacate that place. Donahue, finding one of his previous professional translations, is reminded of Gelman, his philosopher friend, with whom he was in touch years back. So he goes to this person, Deve Gelman's apartment, and he drops off his suitcase, and upon Finn's advice, he goes also to the home of Anna Quentin, a singer and his former lover. Now, she's busy with a film project, and she redirects him to her actor sister Sadie. Now, this is an important character here. So now Donahue tracks down Sadie, who is hiding from his philosopher friend Hugo Bellfounder, who is actually in love with her. So he remembers Hugo from a series of philosophical discussions they had once had on the nature of language. So Donahue, returning to Mages to get his last possessions that he has left behind, is intercepted by Sammy, who bribes him to leave peacefully. So Donahue, we see, gambles the money over the phone and he wins an amount of around 633 pounds. Now Donahue agrees to house sit for Sadie. And then suddenly he realizes that he has been imprisoned there. Sitting inside the house, he feels like a prisoner. So Davey and Finn help him escape and he decides to look for Hugo, having accidentally answered a phone call placed to Anna which signaled that he's in love with her. Now there's a lot of confusion here because we see somebody is in love with some character and it later opens up as to who, it becomes clear as we move on with the characters as to who is in love with whom. Now there is a note posted on Hugo's door which states that he is at a pub. So Davey, Finn and Donahue hop from bar to bar looking for him and they get progressively drunken. They encounter an activist who calls himself Lefty Todd and they swim in the Thames. So when they wake up the following morning, Davey realizes that he forgot to give Donahue a letter from Anna which says that she wishes to see him immediately. He runs to give this letter to Donahue from Anna which says that she wishes to see. So he runs to the theatre where she works, but she's already left the theatre and she's departed. So he goes to Sadie's door where he overhears a conversation that sounds like Sammy and Sadie's plot to rip off one of his translations for a film. Now here Donahue is angry. He recruits Finn to enter Sammy's apartment to steal that script. They do not find that script. They fail to find it. So Donahue takes Sammy's dog, Mr. Mars, as leverage. They come upon a tabloids which states that Anna is on her way to Hollywood with a stop in Paris. So all these events take place and lots of things go on and it is like a Shakespearean drama moving hither and thither and they pursue each other and then they pursue Hugo and they end up at a studio in the south of London. Then we hear that their Lefty Todd is delivering a speech about socialism. Now Donahue takes Hugo's side there, but before he can speak, a political march of the United Nationalists there start a stampede. There's a whole crowd. So the movie set collapses and Donahue escapes by commanding Mars to play dead, crying out for a veterinarian. Then the next day we see that he goes to Davey's and he finds the money that he had won from gambling. So he and Davey send a blackmail note to Sammy demanding £100 in exchange for Mars. So Donahue receives 2 letters from Maggie that contain a job lead in Paris and money to recover the travel costs. Now, while all this is happening, Donahue finds and he's shocked to hear that one of his writing rivals by the name of Bretrule has won an award for his novel. So this is like a shock for him. And he finds that this person has won that award which is not deserved. So in the coming days, in the coming weeks, Donahue is like depressed. He sinks into depression and he finds a work as a hospital assistant. And we see, surprisingly, that Hugo is one of his first patients, having been struck by a brick that was thrown at him at a political event. So he visits the hospital in the middle of the night to avoid being fired for being overly familiar with a patient on the job. Now we see Anna loves him and he loves Sadie, who in turn loves Donahue. So there is a huge triangle built up in even the love affairs. So Donahue helps Hugo escape the hospital, but is spotted by his boss and quits the job before being formally fired. Now a lot of events take place with a pace that is difficult to catch with, because there is a lot of turmoil also, a lot of happening also, and then there is the relationship issue also. But then towards the end of the novel, we see that Donahue goes to visit Hugo. Hugo has actually absconded, leaving his possessions to Lefty, and he also finds that Finn has returned to his home Ireland. Now, Sadie convinces Donahue to pay for Mars to reconcile with Sammy. And having made peace with all the people with whom he was in conflict, Donahue reflects optimistically on the future of his writing career. So we see it ends with a contemplation. So it is primarily about the serendipity of modern life, and it uses its protagonists wandering here and there, moving, absconding, chasing, his wandering, to show how conflicts and resolutions arise unpredictably in the creative realm, in the creative life. And we see that in living his own story to a good resolution, Donahue matures as an artist. And he makes himself ready to finally produce an original work that is worth. Now, when we look into the themes of the novel, we find that the most important thing which is highlighted, as we find in the Shakespearean drama, is the unrequited love. Now, unrequited here means the love which is unreciprocated, which is not returned. We may call it one-sided. For example, here we see in this novel, Jake loves Anna, who loves Hugo, who in turn loves Sadie, who loves Jake. So like a Shakespearean drama, unrequited love weaves through this novel. Then we have the issue of silence. Now there are several allusions to silence in the novel. In fact, the name of the book, the only book that Jake has published, is also called The Silencer. And it is based mostly on Hugo's thoughts and philosophy, who in turn reflects the concepts of the famous philosopher, the Austrian philosopher Wittgenstein, who professed the inability of language to express the deepest and most significant thoughts. We also find the theme of silence apparent in Anna's mime theatre, where the actors do not actually speak and audience is asked not to applaud. Then we have another theme propping out of this novel, and several critics have picturized the relationships between Jake and Hugo as one of artist versus saint. Now, the role of the artist, according to these critics, is to communicate ideas and to put them into some kind of form. So then another important point that we may take out from this work is that it does present an implied picture of the youth in post-war Britain. Before the World War II, Britain was a major world power, having gained riches from its policy of colonization. However, World War II left the British government bankrupt. And because we know shortly after the war, Winston Churchill lost his bid to remain the Prime Minister and Labour Party gained strength. So British youth in 1950 was not as free as their counterparts in the United States. And the war had left them with very few pleasure or dreams. They listened to music from the States, which spoke more directly to them than the music being produced in Britain, their own country. So we see this novel comes directly or indirectly comes up with a number of themes with love at the surface level, ambition at the surface level, but then there are more serious themes to it and underlying at the low and at the inner inside level. So, therefore, making it a very popular and a most important, one of the most important works of the 20th century. So, this was a brief analysis of Under the Net by Iris Murdoch. Thank you for now.